Welcome to the True Crime family. Today, we'll be delving into a chilling case in the quiet suburb of Crestwood, in mid-February 2022. Our story involves a seemingly perfect family, dark secrets, and a twisted plot for murder. In the quiet suburb of Crestwood, life seemed picture-perfect for the Owens family. Karen Owens, a devoted mother of two, was the quintessential housewife, while her husband, Tom Owens, worked long hours as an accountant at a local firm. To outsiders, their marriage appeared solid, almost enviable. However, beneath the surface, Karen was living a double life. Unknown to Tom, Karen had been engaging in a series of secret affairs, driven by a desire for excitement that her stable, predictable marriage lacked. Over the years, these encounters grew more frequent and risky, with Karen meeting her lovers in motels, at private parties, and even in their own home. When Tom was away on business, she was careful, always covering her tracks. But she couldn't resist the thrill that came with each new affair. Tom arrived home earlier than expected on that cold February evening. The flu had taken a toll on him, and all he wanted was to surprise Karen with his unexpected return and then collapse into bed. He quietly unlocked the front door, not wanting to wake the kids if they were already asleep. As he walked through the hallway, he noticed that the house was unusually quiet. The only sound came from the faint rustling coming from upstairs in their bedroom. With each step he took up the stairs, his heart began to pound harder. He wasn't sure why he felt this way. Maybe it was the unsettling silence, or perhaps it was the strange sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air. When he reached the top of the stairs, he noticed that the bedroom door was slightly ajar, with a dim light casting a shadow into the hallway. Tom pushed the door open just enough to peek, and what he saw made his blood run cold. There, in their bed, the bed they had shared for years, was Karen entangled with another man. For a moment, Tom couldn't move. He stood in the doorway, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His mind went blank as he tried to process the scene before him. The woman he had loved, the mother of his children, was betraying him in the most personal way possible. Karen noticed him first. Her face went pale and she gasped, pushing the man off her in a panic. She tried to speak, her voice trembling with shock, but Tom couldn't hear her. The words echoed in his mind, but they didn't register. It felt as though he was watching everything from outside his body, as if this was happening to someone else entirely. Without saying a word, Tom turned round and walked out of the room. Karen called after him, but he didn't stop. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get out of the house. He felt numb as he descended the stairs and stepped outside into the cold night air. He kept walking, trying to escape. The images burned into his mind, but no matter how far he went, the scene replayed over and over again. The days that followed were a blur of anger and confusion. Tom couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All he could think about was Karen's betrayal. He became consumed with the need to understand what had happened. He began going through her phone when she wasn't looking, searching through her emails, digging through every piece of her life that he could access. What he discovered was far worse than he had imagined. Karen had been leading a double life for years. There wasn't just one man. There were several, and the affairs had been happening for longer than he cared to admit. Each piece of evidence he found felt like another knife in his heart. Every text message, every hidden email, Every secret meeting exposed a side of Karen he never knew existed. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had built a life with, had been living a lie. Tom's discovery of Karen's infidelity pushed him to the edge. The love he once had for her twisted into something dark and consuming. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had done, how she had betrayed him with not just one man, but several. The betrayal festered inside him, turning into an obsession that consumed his every thought. Sleep became impossible, food lost all its taste. His mind was filled with one thing: revenge. He couldn't just let it go. He couldn't let these men, who had stolen his life from him, get away with it. Tom began to plan his next steps, his thoughts growing more sinister by the day. He wanted to confront Karen's lovers, make them pay for their role in destroying his marriage. He fantasized about it, imagining how he would force them to confess every detail of the affair, how he would make them feel the same pain he was feeling. On March 3rd, 2022, Tom decided it was time to act. He had found out the name of one of Karen's lovers, a local gym instructor named Derek. After days of tracking Derek's routine, Tom knew exactly where to find him. That evening, Tom parked his car near Derek's apartment, waiting in the shadows for him to return home. The street was quiet, and the darkness seemed to cloak Tom's growing rage. When Derek finally appeared, Tom's heart began to race. Derek was just a regular guy, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. As Derek approached the entrance to his building, Tom stepped out of the shadows. Derek looked up, surprised to see Tom. But before he could say anything, Tom confronted him. The anger that had been boiling inside Tom spilled out, and he demanded that Derek tell him everything about his affair with Karen. Derek was caught off guard, confused and defensive, but Tom wasn't listening. The confrontation escalated quickly, and when Derek tried to walk away, Tom snapped. Without thinking, he grabbed a gym towel that Derek had slung over his shoulder. In one swift motion, Tom wrapped the towel around Derek's neck and began to pull. The rage that had been festering inside him now exploded as he tightened the towel, ignoring Derek's desperate attempts to fight back. Tom's grip grew tighter and tighter, fueled by all the anger and pain he had been holding in. He could feel Derek struggling, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. It was as if everything he had been feeling needed to be released in this moment. Tom watched as Derek's struggles weakened, his body going limp in his hands. Finally, it was over. Tom stood there, breathing heavily, looking down at Derek's lifeless body. The reality of what he had just done began to sink in. The rage that had driven him was gone, replaced by a cold, empty feeling. Tom dropped the towel and backed away, his mind racing with what he had just done. He had crossed the line, one that he could never go back from. Killing Derek didn't bring Tom the relief he had hoped for. Instead, it fueled his anger, making him feel powerful for the first time in months. He decided that one murder wasn't enough. He needed to eliminate all of Karen's lovers. Over the next week, Tom methodically hunted down 2 more men, both of whom had been involved with Karen. Each murder was more brutal than the last. As Tom's rage grew and his sanity slipped further away, on March 6, 2022, Derek's body was found by a neighbor. The neighbor noticed something was wrong when Derek didn't show up for his usual morning run. Concerned, he knocked on Derek's door, but there was no answer. He decided to check the apartment. When he found the door unlocked, he He stepped inside and discovered Derek's lifeless body. The police arrived quickly. They examined the scene, but there were few clues. Derek's apartment was neat with no signs of a struggle. The only evidence they found was the towel Tom had used, but it had no fingerprints. The lack of evidence puzzled the detectives. They couldn't find any motive or suspect. 2 days later, on March 8, 2022, the body of another man was found. This time, it was a local businessman killed in a motel room. The motel staff found he didn't check out on time. His body was found on the bed with clear signs of a violent struggle. There were bruises and cuts, and it was clear that the murder had been brutal. The police were called again. This crime scene was different. There were signs of a fight, but still no clear evidence pointing to the killer. The police found some fibers and hairs, but they weren't enough to identify anyone. The lack of witnesses and surveillance footage made the investigation difficult. The police began to suspect the murders were connected. Both victims were men, and both had been killed within a few days of each other. The detectives started looking for links between the two men. They dug into their backgrounds, searching for any connections. As they investigated, they found a common link. Both men had been involved with Karen Owens. Derek had been Karen's lover for a few months, and the businessman had been involved with her for nearly a year. This connection made the detectives look closer at Karen and her husband, Tom. The detectives decided to interview Karen. She seemed shocked and upset about the murders. She claimed to know nothing about why her lovers were being targeted. She told the detectives that she had ended her affairs and was trying to fix her marriage. Her story seemed believable, and there was no evidence to prove otherwise. The detectives then turned their attention to Tom. They interviewed him as well, but he also seemed unaware of the murders. Tom appeared sad and distant, still reeling from discovering Karen's infidelity. His alibis for the nights of the murders checked out, and there was no direct evidence linking him to the crimes. Without solid leads, the investigation hit a brick wall. The detectives had their suspicions, but no concrete proof. They continued to watch Tom and Karen, hoping for a break in the case, but none came. The lack of evidence and witnesses made it hard to move forward. The detectives knew they needed more to solve the case, but for now they were stuck. By mid-March, Tom was barely holding on to his sanity. The guilt and rage that had driven him for weeks were now consuming him from the inside. He had already taken lives, and the darkness inside him only seemed to grow. But there was one more man left. One more person who had been a part of Karen's secret life. This man was different. That he wasn't just some fling. He was a wealthy real estate agent, someone who had been with Karen for over a year. Tom saw him as the root of all his pain. One night, Tom decided it was time to finish what he had started. He followed the man through the city, his mind fixed on what he was about to do. The man, completely unaware of the danger he was in, drove to a secluded spot on the outskirts of town, a place where he often went to clear his head. Tom watched from a distance, waiting for the right moment. His heart pounded in his chest and his hands shook. But he was determined. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As the man got out of his car, Tom moved in his steps, heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. The darkness around them seemed to close in, and Tom could hear his own breath, loud and ragged. He approached the man, his mind a chaotic mix of anger, fear, and despair. But just as he was about to strike, something inside him broke. All the pain, all the anger that had been driving him, suddenly fell away, and he was left with nothing but an overwhelming sense of guilt and horror at what he had become. Instead of attacking the man, Tom fell to his knees, his body shaking uncontrollably. He began to speak, his words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate confession. He told the man everything about Karen's affairs, about how he had killed Derek, and about how he had lost all control of his life. The man, at first confused and then terrified, listened in shock. He had no idea who Tom was or why he was telling him these things, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. As Tom continued to ramble, the man saw his chance to escape. He backed away slowly, then turned and ran, his heart pounding as he made his way back to his car. He sped away, dialing the police with trembling hands. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Tom still there, sitting in the dirt, covered in blood and mumbling to himself. He didn't fight when they handcuffed him, didn't say a word as they led him to the police car. The fire that had fueled his actions was gone, leaving only a broken man who could barely understand what he had done. As Tom was taken into custody, a shocking twist emerged. The police, while searching the Owens home, found evidence suggesting that Karen had known about Tom's actions all along. Text messages between Karen and one of her lovers revealed that she had been manipulating Tom, feeding his paranoia and subtly encouraging his violent tendencies. It became clear that Karen had been pulling the strings from the start, using Tom's love and jealousy to eliminate her lovers when she grew tired of them. The investigation quickly pieced together the timeline of Tom's descent into madness. On March 10, 2022, detectives began questioning Karen. At first, she played the role of the grieving wife, shocked by her husband's actions. But as the evidence mounted, text messages, phone records, and even a diary where she had detailed her affairs and her growing disdain for Tom, it became clear that Karen wasn't the innocent victim she pretended to be. In text messages she shared with her husband, Karen would hint at Tom's untrustworthiness, saying things like, "Tom, do you ever feel like people are laughing behind your back?" She would mention feeling unsafe and worried, suddenly pushing Tom towards violent thoughts. "I heard noises last night when you were gone. It scared me so much," she would write, making Tom more paranoid and angry. Karen's diary, found hidden in the attic, was the final piece of the puzzle. She had written about her affairs in great detail, describing how she enjoyed the thrill of her secret life. But the diary also revealed her growing hatred for Tom. "Tom is so boring," she wrote. "I wish he would just disappear." The most chilling entries, however, showed how she had planned to manipulate Tom. "If I push him just right, he will snap. He will get rid of my problems for me." When Tom was arrested, he was in shock. He couldn't believe what he had done, and he couldn't believe Karen had known. He had truly loved her, and the realization that she had used his love to turn him into a monster was unbearable. He confessed everything to the police, hoping to find some peace. On March 15, 2022, Tom was charged with 3 counts of murder. His defense attorney argued that Tom had driven to insanity by Karen's betrayal and manipulation. The court heard about the text messages, the diary, and the phone records. The evidence against Karen was overwhelming, but the prosecution, led by a sharp and determined painted a picture of a man who had allowed his jealousy to consume him, leading to a spree of brutal killings. The trial began in early January 2023. Every day, the courtroom was full. People from Crestwood and beyond came to watch the drama unfold. The media covered the trial, adding to the intense atmosphere. The prosecution started strong. They presented Karen's diary, which was a key piece of evidence. The diary showed her affairs, her manipulation, and her growing hatred for Tom. The prosecutors also used forensic evidence. They linked Tom to each crime scene with fingerprints, DNA, and other traces. They showed how Tom had planned and executed each murder with precision. But the most shocking part was Karen's involvement. The prosecution showed text messages between Karen and her lovers. These messages revealed that Karen had been manipulating Tom, pushing him towards violence. She had used his love and jealousy to her advantage. The evidence painted Karen as a cold, calculating woman who had used Tom as a pawn. The most dramatic moment came when Tom took the stand. His testimony was emotional and heartbreaking. He spoke about his love for Karen and how her betrayal had shattered him. He described the moment he discovered her infidelity and how it had driven him to madness. He talked about his overwhelming guilt for the murders he had committed. The jury listened in silence, captivated by his tragic story. Tom's tears and visible remorse made a deep impact on everyone present. Karen's defense tried to paint her as a victim too. They argued that she had never directly asked Tom to kill anyone. They claimed she was just a woman, trapped in a loveless marriage, seeking excitement. But the evidence against her was too strong. The diary entries and text messages showed a clear pattern of manipulation. Karen's cold demeanor on the stand didn't help her case either. She came across as unfeeling and calculating, which only strengthened the prosecution's argument. In the end, the jury found Tom guilty on all counts. They believed he had been manipulated, but he had still committed the murders. On April 25, 2023, Tom was sentenced to death. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Tom's family wept, and he stood there, broken and resigned. Karen was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The judge stated that while she hadn't killed anyone herself, her actions had directly led to the deaths of 3 men. Karen showed little emotion as she was led away, maintaining her cold, detached demeanor until the end. Seeing as everything unfolded, one can only wonder if the monster within Tom was created because of his wife's extreme infidelity. Some speculations have it that this may not be the first time Tom has murdered someone because he was so skillful and determined for a novice. But then again, we wonder, could Tom have taken a better path towards dealing with his wife? Could he also have gotten away with maybe just one murder if his wife had not manipulated him? We even heard one police officer say it would have been better if he simply murdered his wife instead of murdering the men who simply had an innocent affair with her. Now Tom is gone, no life sentence, only a death sentence because of a woman. So please, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our true crime stories. We have many true crime stories of people who let their obsession become their undoing. Be sure to check them out.